wanna see good news. You don't see on regular TV. From another perspective, something relative to your needs. And we gonna have deep subjects, and we gonna turn the lens. And there's no topic we won't skip. So please don't miss weekly. Tune in to weekly check-in. Weekly check-in. Weekly check-in. Weekly check-in. Tune in to weekly. Tune in check-in. Weekly check-in.
Let's talk about New York and Cuomo legalizing cannabis. I would like to know, what do you think are the legal social implications? Do you think Cuomo was just doing this to keep his job and keep them feds off of him?
Cuomo was doing this. Yeah, he was doing this to keep them feds off of him. He needed to send a lifeline to the progressives that he had been beefing with so hard in his state and on the Democrat side. So he really needed to try to get a win, to try to get some more progressives on his side, because he's probably losing a lot of the moderates with this, because you know how quick the moderates will abandon somebody like they did Al Franken when a little bit of scandal comes. So, but the progressives will at least stick by you a little more, like the far left, right? So I think he did this for that reason, but it could be because of what he's doing. It could have some, it could still have some good intentions behind it. It could still have some good repercussions behind it, right? So one thing I like about his legalization is his legalization also implements the social criminal reform side of it as well. So this is the first time I've seen this with anybody who has legalized marijuana. So he's legalizing the cannabis, but also once they legalize, everybody who's in jail for lower offenses and for nonviolent lower drug offenses will not only get out of jail, their records will be expunged.
Well, no, their records won't be expunged. So that's still what they're fighting about. So they won't be expunged. They'll just put what's called an exclusion on them so that they can re-enter the industry. So they're fighting about expungement right now. That's where the details are. That's where the details are getting. That's where, to me, I think he can lose progressives again, to your point, is because if he can't get, total expunction, then he's going to have a problem. But that's a fine dancing line, Dame. And what he's trying to do right now to dance that line is do the exemption. So it won't provide the expunging of the record, right? It'll be the exemption that allows you to get back in, the industry if you're a non-violent offender. And then will also allow you then to vote, right? It'll allow you because of that exemption. So, but as you know, right, New York is very politically diverse. People forget that New York is not just New York City. There's an entire state that we're talking about, and the capital is in upstate New York, whereas you have indicated there's a lot of moderates. So that is one of the places that there is, because I don't want to cut you off, but that's one of the places that they're still kind of struggling.
Yeah. So and thanks for that correction. And you're right, because they were talking about adding these other pieces for reentry, which even in that, we haven't had that in other places as well, right? We haven't even had the opportunity for reentry programs implemented along with, because I think that was a big thing. A lot of these states, they try to implement the reform after. It's too late, too hard to get. But if you're doing a reform while it's on the ballot or while it's the law is being signed, I think you'll have an easier time because it becomes a full package together. So we'll see what happens. Of course, I'll never trust it, but I know, like you said, Kaya, he needed to send a lifeline out, and he needed to get the heat off of him for all these sexual allegations. So this was the best way to get something else in the news. He had to create his own news cycle, and it was kind of a brilliant move to do it like this.
So I have a quick question. I do know when they were speaking about, because they were actually trying to force New Jersey to legalize the laws first. But in that whole tri-state area, the idea is that if either New York or New Jersey would do it, it would pressure the other state or states in the area to legalize it. Do you think this new legislation or this legislation in New York will push the line in terms of getting cannabis decriminalized on a federal level?
No, So let's back up for a second, because I don't necessarily think it was a political ploy. I think the political timing was advantageous, but if you watch, let me set this up. First off, in the 50 states, there's only about 11 states that have full-time legislatures. What that means is that they meet just like the United States Congress does all year round, with the recesses that are in between. Most states, right? Most states have part-time legislatures. And so when you have a part-time legislature, you only meet, a couple of months out of the year, which then puts a press on legislation, because you got to get it in, because if not, you don't have a recess of 3 weeks where you can come back and bring it back. So the reason I say that is that this marijuana legalization piece in New York has been presented every session for the last 5 or 6 years. One of the biggest sticking points was for progressives that are inside of upstate is that they were not passing it without any social reform piece, that they weren't going to pass it. So that's what kind of slowed the wheels down of why the legislation hasn't gotten to the finish line for Cuomo to sign to have this story. Now, I do believe that because it's been in the pipeline and he is having these struggles, right, that he got his caucus together, got his team together, hey, let's get this done, right? Let's get this actually over the finish line where I can actually sign it, right? And have a signing ceremony so we can shift the news cycle. I don't disagree with that at all. But the idea that he just did it for that reason negates the fact that there have been real advocates pushing in New York for several congressional sessions, state congressional sessions, to get that social justice piece in there, because they were not going to be okay with it if not. And the reason that I don't think that this criminalizes or decriminalizes this at the federal level is because it would then require an entire reworking of codes and statutes. And I just don't feel that the administration right now has that as a priority because of everything else that's going on. Now, from what I do know from people that are in Washington that are having these conversations, it's kind of a, kind of look away situation, right? So to the outfits, to DEA, to ICE, to all of these other federal agencies that would be looking into marijuana, they've basically told them, unless we're talking about, an extremely large quantity, look the other way. And the reason is because it's going to get us into a situation, right? Because this is coming from the top. It's going to get us into a situation where we're going to have to go into the Supreme Court, and we know where the Supreme Court lies. We know it's stacked 6-3. So to not engage all the other pieces, we're not going to decriminalize it. We're not going to have to change statutes, but we're also at the federal level going to look the other way while they do it, so that once we do have that case and then send it to the Supreme Court, then it will be organized. I don't know if you guys saw today, a news story came out that Joe Biden has issued a task or a form or whatever they do when they want to do an exploratory about expanding the Supreme Court, right? That was just announced today. So to me, we're getting to the place that we're going to get decriminalization at the federal level, but we're not at the political timing yet because of all of the other layers that have to go inside of this. And it's going to go to the Supreme Court. This is not a case that stops along the way, because it would be a case from the federal government against a state, which immediately goes to the Supreme Court without passing through the lower court systems, and you're going to have a problem. Now, as far as New Jersey is considered, or the surrounding states, is it going to put pressure? Absolutely, it's going to put pressure. And it's going to put pressure because they're in a tri-state area, and trying to then police, govern all these areas are going to become a complete nightmare. And we've already seen this play out in Colorado, where they decided that we're going to legalize it and then let each county decide how they're going to do it. And that became a nightmare quick, fast, in a hurry. So a lot of people around the country are watching how Colorado did it first, watching the mistakes they made, watch how California did it, watch the mistakes that they've made. And so I definitely think that it's going to put pressure on the surrounding in the tri-state area to make a move fast, because it's going to be too difficult to police.
That's interesting. I think also just very quickly as we wrap this segment up, there's also a lot of conversation on, is what is being produced in these dispensaries actually weed? Like what people are reporting is that what I smoked in the 72 is nothing like what's coming out of these dispensaries. This is like crack cannabis. So that's even, I think, a conversation that we could have, down the way in terms of, in this legalizing cannabis, what does that look like in the production of it, and who will control it, right? Because I think, in my opinion, laws are debated over because it all comes down to money. Who's going to control the cash flow, especially with cannabis? So,
which is why, to your point, right, about this control piece, which is why that's why I don't see it happening at the federal level, right? Because for one, there's all these bureaucratic headaches and administrative headaches that there have to be clear pathways on how to get it forward, and take into consideration all the political blowback you're going to get on both sides. They don't have a clear pathway. That's one. And they don't have a clear pathway administratively or about this money. Because then the question then becomes, do we have a federal tax on it? Mm-hmm. Where does that federal tax money go, right? How is it going to be delineated amongst other federal tax money, right? How do the states get their piece? Is the county going to, because right now in California, for instance, you go to the dispensary, there is the city tax, there is the county tax, and then there is the state tax that's on that piece of marijuana, right? So an eighth, that's $25 may run you $30 or $40 because of all of the taxes. So then if you're talking about adding a federal tax, what does that look to the industry? How do everybody get their cut? And then how do, as you said, this big agra, right? Because we're talking about big agra when we're talking about dispensaries. How does this big agra ensure that they're getting their cut too? And is all of it going to be passed on to the consumer? And then how are you going to regulate that? Not just what's in the dispensary, but also regulate the cash flow. So there's way too many questions right now, I think, for us to have a real solution about on a federal level, because states are struggling with it.
The way you ran that back, I don't know if you're a professor. You ran that back quick, and you ran that back tight. It ain't no fun if the homies can't have none. You did the straight dope game in a legalized way. Very impressed, by the way.